On January 28th, 1994, I was suddenly woken up at around 4:30 in the morning by my father. Without my glasses on, my mind still groggy, and with the hallway light silhouetting him from behind, my father said the following words to me: "Mom is dying." I was 18 years old at the time, in my first year of college, yet all that I could mutter in response was, "No." When I think back to that moment, I feel as weak as a child and completely helpless to do anything. We had known since mid-October, when my mom was diagnosed with ovarian cancer, that this might be the eventual outcome. But until that moment arrives, you live in a bubble, unwilling to accept the truth. My father and I were the only ones in the house at the time, seeing as though my sister had just moved out a few months before, and my brother was on Vancouver Island, having flown a courier run during the night from Vancouver to Victoria. I quickly got dressed, and my father called both my sister and our good family friend Jan Rutledge, who had recently lost her own father a few months before, and told them to come up to the house as quickly as possible. In the half hour or so that my father and I waited for them to arrive, the BC Cancer Clinic had called again to say that my mother had passed away. I asked Jan what to do at that point, and she told me that I would have to decide whether to see my mother's body or not. She told me that when her father died, she chose not to view the body, yet something inside me pushed me to go, as this might be the last chance that I would have to spend with my mom, even in an ethereal sense. My sister finally arrived, and my father had gotten a hold of my brother in Victoria as well. He would be flying over to Vancouver as soon as possible, and asked my father to pick him up at the airport, while I drove my sister to the cancer clinic. As we drove into Vancouver, the morning scenery was simply breathtaking. The sun was starting to rise over the mountains in the east, with not a single cloud in the sky. It's weird how you notice details like that in the face of such tragedy, yet that sunrise was the most vibrant and beautiful sunrise I had ever seen in my life. When my sister and I arrived at the clinic, we walked up together and met the nurses at the station outside my mom's room. They tried their best to comfort us, but I simply didn't know how to feel or react at that point. I was just in some kind of sick limbo. They led us to her room, and my sister decided to go in first while I waited outside. I stood there feeling like a fool, not knowing what to do or what to say. And then after about 15 minutes or so, my sister came out, her eyes bloodshot and teary. I gave her a hug and tried to console her as best as I could. One of the nurses led her to a family room that they have set aside for families to grieve in, situations like the one my own was going through. And then at that point, it was just me. I was left standing there. Do I go in or not? I took a deep breath and slowly opened the door and walked around the corner of the room. There, lying motionless, face locked, and eyes glazed over, was my mom. As soon as I saw her, my body went numb. My legs buckled and I collapsed to the floor. I wailed and cried like an infant for God knows how long. I simply don't know, because during that moment I went insane. I lost complete control of my emotions and any concept of time or reality. After what I think was about 20 minutes or so, I slowly regained my composure and crawled up the wall so that I could stand up. I then walked over to the bed and reached out to touch her, but something inside me said, "No, that isn't your mom anymore." And so I retracted my hand and gazed at her one last time. I could see that her eyes were starting to turn white and that her jaw was locked open, and so I decided that I had seen enough. It was this final and brutal dose of reality that finally made me realize and accept the fact that my mom was dead, which allowed me to leave the room. As I closed the door, I saw that my father and brother had just arrived, and they were talking to my mom's doctor as well. As they walked into my mom's room, the nurses saw that I was very much emotionally drained and on the verge of collapsing yet again, so they went and brought a chair for me to sit down on outside in the hallway. The doctor came up to me and tried to offer words of comfort, but I couldn't say a word. I just sat there motionless, looking at him right in the eyes. All the while my mind was screaming, "You let my mother die!" After a minute or two, he realized that I was simply not in the mood to be comforted, and he went inside to talk to both my dad and brother. Then after a while I regained at least some of my composure and left so that I could go to the family room and try to comfort my sister. After about another 20 to 30 minutes, my father and brother emerged from the hospital room where my mom was lying, and we came together as a family to try and comfort one another. We decided to drive back to the family home in Tawasin to grieve together and to try to come to terms with what had happened. Whereas I was the one who drove my sister's Jeep to the clinic in Vancouver earlier that morning. Since I was still in such a state of shock, I asked my sister to drive us both home. Yet throughout the entire drive back home, I kept thinking just how vibrant the sun, the trees, the mountains, and simply everything around me looked, and I have never before, nor since, seen such a beautiful sky.